The alarm bells screamed across Kepler Station as another wave of dark ships appeared on the horizon. Commander Vex pressed his blue hands against the command console and watched the scanner display with growing fear. The numbers kept climbing. 100 enemy ships, 200, 500. "Sir, we have incoming Devourer vessels on all fronts," reported Lieutenant K from her position at the communications desk. Her voice shook despite her years of military training. "They're moving in formation, Delta 7. Vex closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Formation Delta 7 meant only one thing. The Devourers were preparing for a final assault. They had played with the Coalition forces long enough. Now they wanted to finish what they started. "How many ships do we have left?" Vex asked, though he already knew the answer would not be good. 43 operational vessels, sir. Most are damaged from the last attack. 43 ships against 500. The math was simple and terrible. Vex looked around the command center at the faces of his crew. Altari, Krill, Vega, Soros, Verdani, and Lumina beings all worked together at their stations. Representatives of 7 different species, all united in their final hour. The Devourers had been hunting them for 3 long years. These mechanical monsters moved from system to system, consuming everything in their path. They ate planets, stars, and entire civilizations. Nothing could stop them. Every weapon the galaxy had developed over thousands of years had failed. Captain, Rex of the Krill species turned his insect-like head toward Vex. "Commander, the outer defense grid is failing. We have maybe 6 hours before they break through. 6 hours." Vex remembered when they thought they had months to prepare. Before the Devourers learned to adapt to their quantum shields, before they neutralized the plasma cannons, before they turned their own molecular disruptors into useless scrap metal. "What about the evacuation ships?" Vex asked. "The last transport left 2 hours ago," Kay replied. "They carried the remaining civilians to the inner colonies. At least, some would survive. The children would live to see another day, even if the adults did not. That had to count for something." The station shook as enemy fire hit the outer hull. Red lights flashed across all the displays. Damage reports flooded in from every section. Hull breach on Deck 7. Power failure in the engine room. Life support failing in the residential areas. "It's all ships. This is Commander Vex," he spoke into his headset. "Take defensive positions around the station. We make our stand here." The Coalition fleet moved into formation. Altari cruisers with their bright blue hulls took the front line. Krill fighters buzzed around them like angry insects. The crystalline Vega ships reflected light in beautiful patterns as they powered up their energy weapons. Gaseous Nimbus vessels looked like floating clouds as they prepared their chemical weapons. "Coming transmission from the Soros ship Lightning," Kay announced. "Put it through." The voice of Captain Zoll filled the command center. His reptilian species was known for being calm under pressure. "Commander Vex, our scans show the Devourers have new adaptations. Their armor is now resistant to our ion beams." Of course it was. The Devourers always adapted. So that was their greatest weapon. Every time the Coalition found a way to hurt them, they changed. They learned. They became stronger. "What about the fusion missiles?" Vex asked. "Ineffective, sir. Absorb the energy and convert it to power their own systems." Vex felt his heart sink. The fusion missiles had been their last hope. Now they had nothing left except basic kinetic weapons and the determination to fight. The enemy fleet drew closer. Through the main viewing screen, Vex could see the Devourer ships in detail. They looked like floating cities made of black metal. Strange lights pulsed along their surfaces. Massive cannons pointed in every direction. "Sir, they're charging their primary weapons," reported the Verdani officer at the science station. His plant-like features showed no emotion, but Vex could sense his fear. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Vex commanded. The Coalition fleet scattered as beams of dark energy shot through space. One beam hit a Krill fighter directly. The small ship simply vanished, converted into raw energy that the Devourer absorbed. "We lost the ship, Braveheart," Kay said quietly. Vex watched as more beams fired from the enemy fleet. A Vega cruiser tried to dodge but was too slow. The crystalline ship shattered into a million pieces, each fragment glowing briefly before going dark. Nimbus ship Stormcloud is requesting permission to engage, Kay reported. Granted, all ships open fire. The Coalition forces unleashed everything they had. Energy beams, plasma bolts, quantum torpedoes, and kinetic shells flew toward the Devourer fleet. For a moment, it looked like some of their shots were hitting home. Explosions bloomed across the dark hulls of the enemy ships, but the victory was short-lived. The Devourer ships absorbed the energy from the explosions. Their hulls began to change, adapting to each type of weapon being used against them. Within minutes, the Coalition's attacks became completely useless. Their adaptation rate is faster than ever, the Verdani science officer observed. They're learning from multiple attacks simultaneously. A group of Devourer ships broke away from the main fleet and headed straight for the station, their weapons charged with deadly light. All remaining ships, protect the station, Vex ordered. The Coalition fleet moved to intercept, but they were too few and too damaged. The Soros ship Lightning exploded as it tried to ram a Devourer vessel. Two luminous ships, beings of pure energy, sacrificed themselves to give the others time to retreat. Sir, hull breaches on decks for 5 and 6, Kay reported. We're losing atmosphere fast. The station shook again as more enemy fire found its target. Sparks flew from damaged consoles. The lights flickered and went out in several sections. Vex looked at his crew. These brave beings from different worlds had fought together until the end, had given everything they had to give, but it was not enough. It'd never been enough. Okay? Send out a final distress call on all frequencies. Vex said. Sir, who would answer? We're the last ones left. Send it anyway. Maybe someone out there will hear it. Maybe they'll learn from our mistakes. Kay's fingers moved across her console. Distress signals sent, sir. Broadcasting on all known frequencies. The Devourer fleet surrounded Kepler Station. Hundreds of weapons pointed at the last bastion of galactic civilization. The mechanical voices of the enemy ships spoke in unison, their words translated by the station's computers. Resistance is futile. Prepare for consumption. Vex stood up straight and faced the main screen. If these were his last moments, he would meet them with dignity. Around him, his crew continued working at their stations, never giving up, even as death approached. All hands, this is Commander Vex. He spoke into the station-wide communication. System, it has been an honor to serve with you all. We may not have one, but we never stopped fighting. It has to count for something. The Devourer ships began their final approach. Dark energy built up in their weapons. In moments, Kepler Station would join the countless other worlds that had fallen before them. Vex closed his eyes and waited for the end. The Devourer ships moved closer to Kepler Station. Their weapons glowed with deadly energy. Commander Vex watched the main screen as death approached. His crew worked at their stations, but there was nothing left to do. They had fired every weapon, used every strategy, and fought with everything they had. Sir, I'm picking up something strange on the sensors, Lieutenant Kay said suddenly. Her voice carried a note of confusion. Vex turned toward her station. What is it? There's a ship. Dropping out of hyperspace? Just one ship? Another survivor? Asked Captain Rex, his insect-like eyes focusing on the display. Kay shook her head. I don't think so, sir. Signature doesn't match any known species in our database. The main screen flickered and changed to show the new arrival. Vex stared at what appeared to be the strangest ship he had ever seen. It was small compared to the massive Devourer vessels, maybe the size of a krill fighter, but it looked nothing like the sleek, advanced ships of the Galactic Coalition. The vessel was rough and ugly. Its hull was made of simple metal plates welded together. Burns and scratches covered its surface. Crude engines pushed it forward with orange flames instead of the clean energy drives used by civilized species. It looked like something built in a scrapyard by someone who had never seen a real starship. Sir, the ship is trying to communicate, Kay reported. It's using an old frequency. Very old. Put it through. Static filled the command center, followed by a voice speaking in a language the computers struggled to translate. The words came through broken and unclear. This is ... Tom Blake. Terran Expeditionary Force. requesting permission to engage enemy vessels. Vex blinked in surprise. Terran, I've never heard of that species. The Verdani science officer consulted. His database, Terra. No records found, sir. They must be from the Outer Rim territories, sir. Should I tell them to retreat? Kay asked. That little ship can't possibly survive against the Devourers. Before Vex could answer, the strange voice came through the speakers again. This time the translation was clearer. Kepler Station, this is Captain Tom Blake of the Terran ship Defiant. I see you folks are in a bit of trouble. Mind if I lend a hand? Vex almost laughed despite their desperate situation. One small primitive ship wanted to help against 500 Devourer vessels. It was either very brave or very stupid. Captain Blake, this is Commander Vex. I appreciate the offer, but you should retreat immediately. These are Devourer ships. They've destroyed our entire fleet. Devourers, huh? Blake's voice sounded calm, almost amused. Yeah, we've heard stories about those metal bastards. Don't worry, Commander. We've been preparing for this fight for a long time. The human ship moved forward, placing itself between Kepler Station and the approaching Devourer fleet. Up close, it looked even more primitive. Vex could see what appeared to be actual gun barrels sticking out from its hull. Physical weapons, instead of energy beams. Sir, the Devourers are targeting the new ship, reported the Krill officer at the weapons station. 3 Devourer vessels turned their attention to the small human craft. Their dark energy weapons charged up, ready to vaporize the newcomer in seconds. Captain Blake, get out of there, Vex shouted into his communicator. But Blake didn't retreat. Instead, his ship did something unexpected. It fired first. Chunks of metal shot out from the human vessel at incredible speed. They weren't energy, beams, or plasma bolts. They were solid projectiles, simple pieces of dense material moving faster than anything Vex had ever seen. The metal slugs hit the lead Devourer ship and punched straight through its adaptive armor like it wasn't there. Explosions bloomed across the enemy vessel's hull. For the first time in 3 years, Vex saw a Devourer ship actually take damage. How is that possible? Whispered Captain Rex. The damaged Devourer ship tried to adapt, its hull shifting and changing to deflect the solid projectiles. But Blake's ship fired again, this time with different weapons. Missiles streaked through space, but these weren't the quantum torpedoes the Coalition used. They were crude, chemical explosives that detonated with simple fire and force. The Devourer ship's adaptive systems went crazy. They had been designed to counter energy weapons and exotic matter, but these human weapons used basic physics. Solid metal moving fast, chemical reactions creating explosions. The Devourers couldn't adapt to something so primitive. It's impossible, breathed the Verdani science officer. Their technology is centuries behind ours, but it's working. Blake's voice came through the speakers again. Sorry about the rough approach, folks. We humans aren't much for fancy energy weapons. We prefer the old-fashioned way of killing things. The human ship spun and dove between 2 Devourer vessels, firing continuously. More solid projectiles and chemical explosives tore into the enemy ships. The Devourers tried to return fire, but their massive weapons were too slow to track the small, fast-moving human craft. He's actually winning, Kay said in amazement. Vex watched as Blake's ship destroyed its 3rd Devourer vessel. The enemy fleet began to change formation, clearly confused by this new type of warfare. Their adaptive systems kept trying to counter energy weapons that weren't there. Captain Blake, what kind of weapons are those? Vex asked. Railguns and kinetic penetrators mostly, Blake replied. Some good old-fashioned nuclear warheads, too. Nothing fancy, just things that go boom, really. Well, nuclear weapons. Vex had read about them in historical databases. Primitive atomic devices that some species used before developing cleaner energy sources. The Coalition had abandoned such crude technology thousands of years ago. But against the Devourer's crude was working. Blake's ship continued its attack, darting between the massive enemy vessels like an angry insect. Every shot it fired found its mark. Every explosion tore through Devourer armor that had seemed invincible moments before. Sir, the Devourer fleet is pulling back, reported the sensor operator. Vex couldn't believe it. The mechanical swarm that had consumed entire civilizations was retreating from one small human ship. Captain Blake, this is incredible, Vex said. How did you know their weakness? Weakness? Blake sounded confused. Commander, these things don't have a weakness. They're just really good at adapting to smart weapons. Lucky for us, humans aren't that smart. We still use rocks and fire to solve our problems. Another group of Devourer ships moved to surround Blake's vessel. This time they came from all directions, trying to overwhelm him with numbers. Blake's response was to fire everything at once. Railgun rounds, missiles, and what appeared to be simple explosive charges filled the space around his ship. The coordinated Devourer attack fell apart as their ships took massive damage from weapons they couldn't understand or counter.
Oh, sir.
I'm picking up more hyperspace signatures, Kay announced. Vex looked at the display as new ships began appearing. More human vessels, each one as rough and primitive-looking as Blake's ship. But now Vex understood that primitive didn't mean weak. Cavalry's here, Blake said cheerfully. Hope you folks don't mind a little noise. The humans tend to be loud. When we fight, the new human ships opened fire immediately. The space around Kepler Station filled with solid projectiles, chemical explosives, and electromagnetic pulses. The Devourer fleet, which had seemed unstoppable minutes before, began to break apart under the assault. Commander Vex stared at the display in wonder. These humans, with their crude ships and ancient weapons, were doing what the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy could not do. They were winning. More human ships dropped out of hyperspace around Kepler Station. Each one looked different from the others, as if they had been built by different people using whatever materials they could find. Some were long and thin, with massive gun barrels running along their sides. Others were short and wide, covered in missile pods and explosive charges. Commander Vex watched from the command center as the human fleet spread out around the Devourer ships. There were maybe 20 human vessels against 400 enemy ships, but somehow the odds didn't seem impossible anymore. Captain Blake, can you explain what's happening? Vex asked through the communication system. How are your weapons working when ours failed? Blake's voice came through clearly now. The communication systems had finally adapted to the human frequency. It's pretty simple, Commander. These Devourer things are really smart. They can learn to counter any advanced weapon you throw at them. But they can't adapt to something they don't understand. I don't follow. Think about it, Blake continued, as his ship fired another barrage of kinetic rounds into a Devourer vessel. Your people developed energy weapons, quantum shields, molecular disruptors, all very advanced stuff. The Devourers study these weapons, figure out how they work, and then develop countermeasures. A new human ship appeared on the display. It was larger than Blake's vessel and bristled with what looked like old-fashioned cannons. The name Vengeance was painted on its side in rough letters. This is Captain Lisa Park, a female voice announced. Tom, you started the party without us. Sorry, Lisa. These metalheads were being rude to our new friends. Park's ship opened. Fire with weapons that looked nothing like the advanced systems the Coalition used. Instead of energy beams, it fired solid metal rods at incredible speed. The rods punched through Devourer armor and kept going, sometimes hitting multiple ships. In a line, railguns, Blake explained. We accelerate chunks of metal using magnetic fields. Simple physics, but very effective. Another human ship joined the battle. This one was called Retribution and appeared to be commanded by someone named Mike Torres. His ship launched missiles that moved much slower than Coalition quantum torpedoes. But when they hit, they created massive explosions that tore huge holes in Devourer hulls. Fusion warheads, Torres explained over the communication channel. We split atoms the old-fashioned way. Makes a big bang. Vex tried to understand what he was seeing. The humans were using technology that the galaxy had abandoned thousands of years ago. Nuclear weapons, magnetic accelerators, simple kinetic projectiles. But these primitive weapons were destroying Devourer ships that had seemed invincible. Sir, the Devourer adaptation algorithms are failing, reported the Verdani science officer. They can't counter the human weapons. Why not? Asked Captain Rex. The science officer studied his readings. The Devourers are designed to analyze and counter advanced technology. But human weapons operate on such basic principles that the Devourer systems can't find anything to counter. How do you adapt to a chunk of metal moving at high speed? How do you counter a simple chemical explosion? Blake's ship spun around a Devourer vessel and fired what appeared to be simple explosive charges directly into its hull. The charges detonated one after another, creating a chain reaction that ripped the enemy ship apart from the inside. "The beauty of human engineering," Blake said cheerfully. "When in doubt, hit it with something heavy or blow it up. Works every time." The Devourer fleet was in chaos. Ships that had moved in perfect formation now scattered in all directions. Their weapons fired wildly, trying to hit the fast-moving human vessels. But the humans were too quick and too unpredictable. "Captain Blake," Vex said, "where did you humans learn to fight like this?" "Practice," Blake replied. "You see, when we first reached the stars, we found ruins everywhere. Dead civilizations, empty worlds, warning messages about something called the Devourer fleet. Most species would have run away or tried to hide, but humans are stubborn. We decided to stay and fight. A group of Devourer ships tried to surround Park's vessel. She responded by launching dozens of small missiles in all directions. Each missile carried a simple but powerful explosive warhead. The Devourers tried to shoot down the missiles, but there were too many of them. We spent generations preparing for this fight," Park added. "While you folks were developing fancy energy weapons, we were perfecting the art of making things explode." "But how did you know it would work?" asked the Krill officer. Torres answered this time. "We didn't. But we figured if these Devourers were smart enough to counter advanced technology, maybe they'd be confused by stupid technology. More human." Ships arrived. Each one had a different design and different weapons. Some carried massive cannons that fired explosive shells. Others launched clouds of small projectiles that moved like deadly swarms. A few ships seemed to specialize in ramming attacks, their hulls reinforced with thick metal plating. "The thing about humans," Blake explained as he destroyed another Devourer vessel, "is that we never agreed on the best way to kill something. So we developed lots of different ways." The battle continued for hours. The humans moved through the Devourer fleet like sharks through a school of fish. Their weapons never stopped firing. Kinetic rounds, explosive missiles, electromagnetic pulses, and simple chemical bombs filled the space around Kepler Station. "Sir, the Devourer fleet is breaking apart," Kay reported. "They're retreating." Vex couldn't believe it. The mechanical swarm that had conquered the galaxy was running away. "Where are they going?" he asked. "Unknown, sir. They're jumping to hyperspace in small groups." Blake's voice came through the speakers. "Don't worry, Commander. They'll be back. Devourers don't give up easy. But now they know we're here, and they'll have to think of a new strategy." "What do we do when they return?" "We'll be ready," Park said confidently. "Humans are good at learning from fights. Next time we'll have even better ways to blow things up." The space around Kepler Station slowly grew quiet as the last Devourer ships disappeared into hyperspace. Debris from destroyed enemy vessels floated everywhere. The human fleet regrouped, their ships looking battered but victorious. "Commander Vex," Blake said, "mind if we come aboard your station? I think we need to have a serious talk about what comes next." Vex looked around his command center at the faces of his crew, who were all staring at the display in amazement. For 3 years, they had been running from the Devourers. Now, in just a few hours, these primitive humans had accomplished what the entire Galactic Coalition could not. "Captain Blake, you and your people are more than welcome," Vex replied. "I think we have a lot to learn from each other." The first battle was over. The humans had won. But Vex knew this was just the beginning. The Devourers would return, and when they did, the galaxy would need to be ready. Captain Tom Blake walked through the docking bay of Kepler Station with 2 other humans behind him. Commander Vex waited with his senior officers to greet their unexpected saviors. The humans looked strange compared to the various alien species that made up the coalition. They were bipedal like the Soros but had no scales. Their skin was pale and soft, and they had hair growing from their heads. Blake was a middle-aged man with gray streaks in his brown hair. He wore a simple uniform. That looked like it had been patched many times. Captain Lisa Park was younger, with short black hair and sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything. Commander Mike Torres was tall and broad-shouldered, with scars on his face that spoke of many battles. Commander Vex, Blake said, extending his hand in what appeared to be a human greeting gesture. "Thank you for letting us dock. We don't get many chances to meet other survivors." Vex carefully took the human's hand, unsure of the proper response. Blake gripped it firmly and shook it up and down. "Thank you for saving us, Captain Blake. I still can't believe what I witnessed today." "Just doing our job," Blake replied with a smile. "Though I have to admit, it felt good to finally fight those metal bastards instead of just running away." They moved to the main conference room, where representatives from all 7 coalition species were waiting. Iltari, Krill, Vega, Saros, Verdani, Nimbus, and Lumina had never seen humans before. They studied the newcomers with curiosity and respect. "Captain Blake," Vex began as they all took seats around the large table, "we need to understand how humanity survived. The Devourers have been hunting us for 3 years. Every advanced civilization in the galaxy has fallen to them." Blake leaned back in his chair. "That's the thing, Commander. When we first reached the stars about 200 years ago, we found exactly what you described. Empty worlds, dead civilizations, warning messages about the Devourers. Most of the ruins we explored had been consumed completely. But you didn't run," observed Captain Rex, his insect-like head tilting to one side. "Humans don't run from fights," Park said firmly. "You might retreat to plan a better attack, but we don't give up." Torres nodded. "We spent decades studying the ruins of fallen civilizations. We learned their languages, decoded their warning messages, and studied their technology. Every species had tried the same approach. Energy weapons, quantum shields, molecular manipulation, all very advanced, all very logical. And all completely useless against the Devourers," Blake added. "So we decided to try a different approach." The Verdani science officer leaned forward. "You deliberately chose primitive technology?" "Not primitive," Blake corrected. "It's just different. While your people were perfecting energy manipulation, humans were perfecting the art of making things explode. We never lost our love for kinetic weapons and chemical explosives." Park stood up and walked to the room's display screen. "May I show you something?" At Vex's nod, she activated the screen and displayed what appeared to be star charts. But these weren't normal navigation charts. They showed the paths of Devourer fleets throughout the galaxy over the past 1,000 years. "We've been tracking them," Park explained. "Every attack, every consumed world, every fallen civilization, we found patterns in their behavior." The display changed to show tactical analyses of Devourer ships, detailed breakdowns of their adaptive armor, their weapon systems, and their defensive capabilities. "We know how they think," Torres said. "They encounter a new weapon, analyze it, develop a countermeasure, and adapt their entire fleet within hours. It's incredibly efficient against advanced technology, but inefficient against basic physics," Blake added. "A chunk of tungsten, moving at 3% of light speed, doesn't care about adaptive armor. Nuclear explosion doesn't care about energy shields. Simple chemical rockets can't be hacked or reprogrammed." Vex studied the display with growing amazement. "Been preparing for this war for 2 centuries? Preparing, training, building weapons, and waiting," Blake confirmed. "We knew they'd eventually come for us. But we also knew that if we could find other survivors, we might have a chance to fight back." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. These humans had dedicated their entire civilization to preparing for a war that might never come. They had given up advanced technology and chosen harder paths, all for the chance to fight an enemy that had never been defeated. "How many human ships do you have?" asked Captain Rex. "Active fleet numbers, about 300 vessels," Torres replied. "But we can build more quickly. Human shipyards don't require exotic materials or advanced energy sources. We use steel, aluminum, and good old-fashioned rocket fuel." Park returned to her seat. "Thing is, Commander, we didn't come here just to rescue you. Came here to propose something bigger." "What do you mean?" Vex asked. Blake leaned forward. We want to take the fight to them. No more running, no more hiding. It's time to go on the offensive. The coalition officers exchanged glances. They had been in full retreat for 3 years. The idea of attacking the Devourers seemed impossible. You're talking about a counterattack, the Lumina representative said. Her energy formed flickering with what might have been excitement or fear. More than that, Blake said. We're talking about a coordinated campaign to hunt down every Devourer fleet in the galaxy and destroy them. That's impossible, protested the Nimbus officer. There are thousands of them spread across hundreds of systems. Not impossible, Torres corrected. Difficult. Yes. It's dangerous. Absolutely. But not impossible. We have advantages now that we didn't have before. Park activated the display again. This time it showed human fleet positions throughout the galaxy. There were far more red dots than Vex had expected. We've been building hidden bases for decades, she explained. Supply depots, repair facilities, weapon manufacturing plants. All hidden in asteroid fields and dead systems were the Devourers. Don't bother to look. And now we have allies, Blake added, gesturing to the coalition officers. Your ships may not be effective against Devourer armor, but they're still valuable. Your sensors are better than ours. Your communication systems are more advanced. Your logistical capabilities could help us supply an extended campaign. Vex felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not just the hope of survival, but the hope of victory. What would you need from us? He asked. Partnership, Blake said simply. Human weapons and tactics combined with coalition technology and resources. Your people provide support, logistics, and intelligence. Our people provide the firepower and the willingness to charge into certain death. It won't be easy, Torres warned. The Devourers will adapt to our tactics eventually. We'll need to constantly develop new weapons and new strategies. But for the first time since this war began, Park said, we have a real chance to win. Commander Vex looked around the table at his officers. He could see the same hope in their eyes that he felt in his heart. The impossible had already happened once today. Maybe it could happen again, Captain Blake. Vex said formally. The Coalition fleet would be honored to join forces with the Terran Expeditionary Force. Blake smiled and extended his hand again. Welcome to the war, Commander. Let's go kill some metal bastards. 6 months after the battle at Kepler Station, the combined human and coalition fleet approached the Devourer command nexus. The massive structure floated in the darkness of space like a mechanical planet. It was larger than anything they had ever seen, stretching for thousands of kilometers in every direction. Strange lights pulsed across its surface, and countless Devourer ships moved around it like insects protecting their hive. Captain Tom Blake stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the Defiant II. The original Defiant had been destroyed in the third battle of the campaign. But Blake had survived, and the humans had built him a bigger ship. Commander Vex stood beside him, watching the tactical display with nervous excitement. That's it, Blake said quietly. The source of all our problems. The Nexus had taken them months to find. Human intelligence networks and coalition sensor technology had worked together to track Devourer movements across the galaxy. Every destroyed fleet had led them closer to this moment. Intelligence reports indicate the Nexus controls all Devourer operations, Vex said. If we can destroy it, the entire network should shut down. Blake nodded. The plan was simple in theory, but nearly impossible in practice. They had to break through the defensive fleet, penetrate the Nexus's outer shell, and plant nuclear charges at its core. The explosion would send a shutdown signal to every Devourer ship in the galaxy. All ships, this is Blake. He spoke into his communicator. Today we end this war, and vessels will punch a hole through their defenses. Ex-coalition ships will provide cover and support. Remember, we only get one chance at this. The combined fleet spread out in attack formation. 300 human ships formed the spearhead, their hulls bristling with railguns, missile pods, and nuclear weapons. Behind them, the surviving coalition vessels prepared to provide sensor support and cover fire. Captain Lisa Park's voice came through the communication system from her ship, Vengeance 3. Tom, I'm reading over 2,000 Devourer ships around that thing. I see them, Blake replied. Mike, are you ready? Commander Mike Torres responded from the Retribution V. All fusion warheads are armed and ready. Let's light up the sky. The Devourer fleet moved to intercept them. Massive ships that had once seemed invincible now looked familiar after months of fighting. The humans had learned their weaknesses and developed new weapons to exploit them. All ships engage, Blake ordered. The space between the fleets filled with weapons fire. Human railguns sent tungsten rods screaming through Devourer armor. Nuclear missiles exploded in brilliant flashes that tore holes in enemy formations. Chemical explosives and electromagnetic pulse weapons disrupted Devourer systems. The Devourers fought back with everything they had. Dark energy beams and gravitational weapons tried to crush the human ships, but the humans had learned to fight. Smart, they used hit-and-run tactics, never staying in one place long enough for the Devourers to target them effectively. Blake's ship dove through a gap in the enemy line, followed by Park and Torres. Behind them, Coalition vessels provided covering. Fire with their energy weapons, which had proven useful for confusing Devourer sensors, even if they couldn't penetrate their armor. We're through the outer perimeter, Blake announced. All ships converge on the Nexus. The massive structure loomed ahead of them, its surface covered in weapon emplacements and defensive systems. Energy beams reached out to destroy the approaching human ships, but the fleet scattered and regrouped, using the Nexus's own size against it. I'm picking up the core location, reported the Verdani science officer from Vex's ship, transmitting coordinates to all vessels. Blake checked his display. The core was buried deep inside the Nexus, protected by layers of armor and defensive systems. Getting there would require them to fight through kilometers of hostile territory. Park Torres, you're with me, Blake said. Everyone else, keep their attention focused on the outer sections. The 3 human ships dove toward the Nexus surface, firing continuously. Their weapons punched holes in the outer armor, creating an entry point. Behind them, explosions lit up the sky as the rest of the fleet battled the Devourer defenders. They flew through corridors inside the Nexus that were larger than city streets. Automated defenses fired at them from all directions, but human reflexes and unpredictable flight patterns kept them alive. The Coalition ships provided real-time intelligence, their advanced sensors mapping the interior as the humans advanced. There, Vex's voice came through the communicator. The core chamber is directly ahead. Blake saw it on his screen. A massive spherical chamber in the heart of the Nexus, filled with pulsing lights and strange machinery. This was the brain that controlled every Devourer in the galaxy. Deploying nuclear charges, Torres announced. His ship fired a spread of specially designed missiles into the core chamber. Each one carried enough explosive power to destroy a small moon. But as the missiles approached their target, defensive systems activated. Energy barriers tried to stop them, and point defense weapons opened fire. They're shooting down the warheads, Park shouted. Blake made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He turned his ship toward the core in increased speed. Tom, what are you doing? Vex asked in alarm. Making sure this works, Blake replied calmly. He armed his ship's entire nuclear arsenal and set them for contact detonation. Tell everyone. It's been an honor. Blake, no. Park and Torres shouted together, but Blake was already committed. His ship shot through the defensive fire and slammed into the core chamber. The nuclear explosion that followed was visible from outside the Nexus. The effect was immediate and devastating. The lights across the Nexus went out section by section. The defensive system stopped firing. Devourer ships around the structure simply stopped moving and began to drift. Sir, we're receiving shutdown signals from across the galaxy. Lieutenant, Kay reported from the command center. Devourer fleets everywhere are going dark. The war was over. Commander Vex watched the dead Nexus slowly break apart. Pieces of the massive structure drifted away into space, no longer held together by whatever force had built it. Around him, his crew cheered and celebrated, but Vex felt the weight of Blake's sacrifice. Captain Park's voice came through the communicator. Commander Vex, Blake left instructions. If anything happened to him, you're in command of the joint. Fleet Vex looked at the display showing human and coalition ships spread across the battlefield. They had won, but the cost had been high. Too many good people had died to reach this moment. "All ships, this is Commander Vex," he announced. "The Devourer threat has been eliminated. We're going home." As the combined fleet began its journey back to Coalition space, Vex thought about what Blake had told him during their last conversation. The war was over, but peace would require even more work than fighting had. The galaxy was free, and now they had to build something worthy of the sacrifice it had taken to liberate it. Humans and aliens, working together, creating a future that honored those who had died to make it possible. Captain Tom Blake was gone, but his legacy would live on in every world that rebuilt. Every child that grew up free, and every star that shone without fear of mechanical death.